Hello, welcome back to Boiler Room Reviews. My name is Ian, and today I'm going to be going through the second half of the novels that I read last year in 2024. As I said previously, I'm not going to speak at any length about these novels, but if there's any novels on this list that you'd like me to do a longer analysis of, please let me know in the comments. And without further ado, let's get started with our first novel, which is the 1925 novels, written then, but I don't think it was actually published in Russia till 1987. It's Heart of a Dog by Mikhail Bulgakov, I think is how you pronounce it. I was speaking to a Russian lady. She said that's how you pronounce it. So this is a very short novel. It's a very funny novel as well. It's kind of an allegory of the Russian Revolution and how the Bolsheviks want the population to behave. It's quite bizarre, almost science fiction. There's scientific experiments on a dog, replacing certain parts of the dog with, I'll leave it there because it could infringe on terms of service. But yeah, I love this. This is one of my favourite novels from last year. Very, very funny, very brief, and lots of historical sort of references in there, which was great. So the second novel, or number 16 for the year, is Muriel Sparks' The Driver's Seat, which I believe came out in 1961. Again, it's a very short book. The ending to this is quite shocking, but I'll be honest, I found it a bit hard going. I read this on holiday and I had to plough through some parts of it. The ending is, as I said, it is very good, very subversive. But yeah, I'd probably give this a 6 out of 10. Number 17, we're back with Clive Barker and his 1988 novel, Cabal. Now, you might know this was made into a film called Nightbreed, which that's kind of a fans-only film, really. It's not of the quality of something like Hellraiser in terms of being an adaptation. And this is quite short for Barker. It's about 200 pages. I enjoyed it. Wasn't the most immersive of Barker's. I suppose you'd say it's a story of alienation. There is a kind of plot twist in there to work with as well. Probably, again, a sort of 6 out of 10. Worth a look if you're a fan of horror and a fan of Barker also. At number 18, we've got a Susan Hill novel that came out in 2012 called Dolly. Now, I'm a huge fan of The Woman in Black. That's the only other novel I've read. I also want to read, I'm the King of the Castle, I believe it's called, which I want to read. This was very, very simple, very economical prose, very short, to the point, very creepy, kind of spooky. It's a ghost story of sorts. Worth a read, very easy to get through, but not the kind of ghost story that stays with you for days. But decent nonetheless. At number 19, we're back with John Williams with his 1960 novel, Butcher's Crossing. I read this whilst I was on holiday as well and really, really enjoyed this one. Not quite so much as Stoner. It's a very sort of different setting. Some people have said that was quite an influence on Cormac McCarthy, which makes sense to me. That sort of realistic Western. There's a lot of the sorts of things you'd expect from John Williams. There's sort of alienation, looking for meaning in life, and I'll be honest with you, you can probably tell when you start reading it, things don't pan out all that well, a bit like Stoner. But yeah, definitely worth picking this one up. Solid 7 or 8 out of 10 for this one. At number 20, we're with Shirley Jackson with her 1948 novel, The Road Through the Wall. Now, I believe this was her first full-length novel. I've only read 2 others of Shirley Jackson, which I absolutely adore, which is We Have Always Lived in the Castle and The Haunting of Hill House. Absolutely brilliant. Now, this was very good, but what I did struggle with, she introduces about 50 characters in the first couple of chapters. A lot of their names sound the same, so I actually found myself writing down sort of little family trees of all these different families that live in the town together. But once it gets going, you can get past that, and there's a very shocking ending to it. And I would argue that there's elements to this that almost reminded me of David Lynch, sort of Twin Peaks, that idyllic town, but if you scratch the surface, things aren't quite what they seem underneath. So yeah, definitely worth a read if you want to go through Jackson's work. At number 20, we've got Poppy Zebright's 1996 novel, Exquisite Corpse. Now, I've already done a review of this on the channel, so please check that out if you're interested. I enjoyed it very much of its time, but yeah, if you want to hear my thoughts on that, please check out the other video. At number 22, we have the very famous 1955 novel by Vladimir Nabokov called Lolita. Now, anyone who's familiar with this will be aware that this is quite a controversial novel for obvious reasons, and I don't really want to go into that too much here in terms of service on YouTube and all. What I would say about this is that I felt that I was in the hands of a real master here. It was at the peak of my reading level. I'm not the most intellectual reader in the world, as you can probably gather, but this was absolutely brilliant. Probably not my favourite book that I read last year, but probably the highest quality. You're really in the hands of a master, and also his use of other languages as well. And then you're reminding yourself he's writing this in English as a second language, and I'm just sat there thinking, crikey, I wish I could write like this in my own language. But yeah, absolutely brilliant novel, very subversive, very controversial, but definitely worth reading if you haven't before. At number 23, we're on now. We've got H.G. Wells' 1895 novel, The Time Machine. Now, this was the fourth I've read by H.G. Wells. Quite fond of his other books. I believe this was the first one he wrote, kind of the godfather of science fiction. Yeah, this was really good fun, and really good sort of open ending to it, which I appreciated. Some really creepy moments in it with, it's the Morlocks, isn't it, from memory, that... I say you could call them the villains in it. But yeah, it's only a short novel, really easy to get through. The sort of novel I'd like to read on a holiday. Definitely recommend if you haven't already read this one. At number 24, we have the Russell Banks novel, The Lost Memory of Skin. I think this was 2011. Now, again, I don't want to talk about this in too much depth in the terms of service on YouTube. Might flag me up on it. But yeah, this is, again, quite a subversive novel. Let's just say it deals with someone who was watching some things they shouldn't have been on the internet, went to meet someone that perhaps they shouldn't have gone to meet, and now they get convicted for it, and now they live under an underpass because they can't go near towns and things like this. So yeah, again, alienation's coming up in this one. The plot does go a little bit off the rails with one of the side characters, I think, as it goes on, but definitely worth a read. Solid 7 out of 10 for this one. At 25, we have the 2021 novel by the Taiwanese writer Chang Yu Ko, Whisper. Now, this I really, really enjoyed. Really enjoyed this. It's got elements of sort of noir to it, lots of sort of folk horror to it. The plot really keeps you going. Yeah, really enjoyed this one. Solid 8 out of 10. The ending's a little bit abrupt, but yeah, I can't recommend this enough. It's his first novel, so let's all go out and buy it. So make sure he writes another one, eh? Number 26, we have Ryo Murakami's Audition from 1997. I have already reviewed this on the channel, so if you'd like to hear my thoughts on this, please watch that video. Very much enjoyed it, though. So moving straight on, we had the 1961 novel by Muriel Spark, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. I'll be honest, I enjoyed it, but I didn't get much out of it. I'd probably, from personal taste, probably a 5 out of 10. For quality, probably a 6 or 7 out of 10. Just a little bit out of my wheelhouse, and sometimes I found the prose a little bit difficult in it. There is a film adaptation, which I'm considering watching because I might get a bit more out of that. But yeah, not really my cup of tea, but that's not to say it's not of quality. The penultimate novel I read last year was Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, which was 1958, I think, from memory. This I enjoyed. Again, it's more like a novella, very, very short. But there's a couple of lines in it that to a modern reader, you go, oh, that's a little bit shocking. But, you know, it's different times and that sort of thing. But yeah, very, very well written, very compelling, very short, and worth picking up if you've not read it before. And finally, the last novel that I read last year, we're back with Yukio Mishima. You can tell I got into Yukio Mishima a little bit last year. It's his novel, The Frolic of the Beasts. This came out in 1961. Now, the premise of this novel I absolutely love. It's kind of a love triangle with violent acts involved, but the delivery of it was kind of mid. I can see why people say it's not one of his best novels. Not that it's dreadful, but it just doesn't land quite as well as some of his others. That being said, the premise is fantastic and very dark, as Mishima quite often is. But yeah, so that's all the novels I read in 2024. If you would like me to do a longer form review of any of them, please just let me know. In the meantime, like and subscribe. Hope you're all doing well, and I will catch you on the next one.